Recording first. Let me try that again because my microphone was muted. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Cinema Royale. Your eyes are not deceiving you. Travis is down in Middleburg Film Festival today. So Khalil, one of our other writers that we've been trying to get on the show for a long time, has finally graced us with his presence. What's up, man?
Hey, how's everything? I'm finally doing this. I'm very glad. You guys have been rocking for so long, and I've talked with Travis, talked with you, just said, hey, I got to get on this podcast. So glad I'm here. So
yeah, man,
good.
We appreciate it. And we got lots of fun stuff to talk about. Obviously, you guys have heard us talk about The Boys. As you can see behind me, I'm a little bit in the fever for it. So Travis is a fan of The Boys. I'm not going to take it away from him, but I think we're a little bit more excited about it than him. And Lovecraft Country we've touched upon as well. Bunch of movies came out this week. If you guys haven't yet this weekend, check out www.punchdrunkcritics.com. Like I mentioned, Travis and one of our other writers, Cortland Jacoby, is out there, as well as Ronnie, I believe. Ronnie Sharp's out there as well. So they've all been seeing movies and posting reviews. Film festivals are still happening, mostly remote, but the movies are the same. So check those out and get all the reviews there. And then we've got some other stuff that's come out this week. A movie called Shithouse. It's actually... the poster for obvious reasons is spelled with but I don't know how to say that. So, a review for that will be up later today. And then The Kid Detective is another one that we got screening info for a little late in the week, so we'll have that for you probably by Monday as well. But yeah, The Boys just finished up. Wasn't last week? Was it last week or week before last?
I think it was the week before, but. Yeah, but it's just still been having, the boys fever, if you will, just given how explosive the final episode was.
Yeah.
I actually rewatched it the other day, and this is a show that has kind of, redone the superhero narrative, if you will, to give it more of a realistic approach. Myself, I wasn't too familiar with the source material, got to be honest, so I went into this with a whole bunch of fresh eyes and immediately fell in love first season. And then the second season just pretty much upped the ante to the point where I'm like, oh, this is peak. And this is not only helping, keep this genre fresh, because everybody says, oh, superheroes are, yeah, they'll never stop saying that. But by default, by creating a hyper realistic, corporate influenced Bad Boys version of how heroes would be in our world, it's just breathed life into it and helped Amazon out in a big way, just by making a very strong show that is something that you're can be continuously drawn into because you don't know what the hell is going to happen.
Yeah, and it's outside the box because everything they've done to this point is kind of inside that box. I mean, they're starting to get more outside of it, but like Jack Ryan. It's a great show. They've done a lot of good shows, but they're all pretty standard shows. So, it sounds like you didn't read the graphic novels before seeing the show. I read them after watching the show, the first season at least. And I'll tell you, they're fucked up, those graphic novels. And the show doesn't even go like as far as they go, but in the way of The Walking Dead kind of set the pace for this, where you don't have to, you can take the theme and not follow exactly what the source material does, and that's what they're doing in this show. A major revelation in the end of the second season is kind of a twist that was hinted at for me. Now, without, all right, so I got a tiptoe, so I'm not spoiling because I don't know how far they're going to go on some other things. But Black Noir in the comic books was not who he is.
I heard that as well.
Yeah,
and I kind of knew that at the beginning of the second season, and so I was actually looking forward to see how the source material have been adapted
Right.
with that knowledge ahead. But when they kind of flipped the script on it, I was just like, oh, this works as well, because this is something completely brand new that's on Amazon,
Yeah.
and it works on that end. And it's my understanding the scene that happened and what happened with Black Noir was a result of the actor's creative input as well. For the end result of what happened to
Right.
during that fight sequence, not trying to spoil too much, was something specific to that actor and something in that actor's personal life, which I also found interesting, because that means the show also takes creative input from the actors themselves to help further enhance the story.
Yeah, and not even just Carl Urban or
Yeah.
Jack Quaid, who I can't. It took me so long to realize that he was Dennis Quaid's son, and then now
You
that I know
can,
it, like,
yeah, as soon as you hear it,
yeah,
and you look at his face, you're like, oh yeah, I see it every scene.
now
You know
I
what I'm
can't
saying?
not see it. Yeah, and that was surprisingly throughout the season. In a show like The Boys, you're gonna have a romance, and it's gonna be the C or D storyline, and you're gonna kind of wait for it to get over. But I gotta be honest, two things about those. Number one, Starlight. I've always been a fan. If I can get misogynistic for a minute, I've always been
Sure.
a fan of women in the relaxed gear. Like, I don't need an evening gown. I need some shorts and a hooded sweatshirt and a ponytail, and I'm good. And she is a perfect explanation of that, because when they're undercover and they're wearing the Marvel Cinematic Universe standard undercover gear of the hoodie and the hat and everything, man, that girl never looks better, especially with that trashy Starlight costume they put her in. But their story was actually kind of, it was unnervingly sweet at some points, yeah, but for the most part, it was actually a bit of endearing quality that the show really needed, because it is so dark and it is so nasty.
Yes. It needs moments of of I wouldn't say fluff, but something to help lift your
Hope,
spirits.
yeah, a little bit of hope,
Yeah.
yeah, especially
And the
considering
dynamic
that.
that
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, the dynamic that those two have is genuine chemistry. Like as
Yeah.
I watched it, you can see moments where they drift apart, come back together, and it's completely believable. It doesn't feel forced or rushed at any part of it. So when they do have their moments of tension, it is heartbreaking and frustrating. But then when they have their moments of reconnection, it really works.
Right.
Especially given the content of the show and how devastatingly dark it gets at
Yeah.
times. It just really makes sure that you can hold on to fun stuff. In addition to Quaid and Starlight, I also am very interested in Kamiko slash the female and
Yeah.
Frenchie. For one, that's a relationship that transcends language, and to the point where we have a mute person from another country interacting with a person who primarily speaks French, and they have to learn to communicate first off, and then continue to have a strong bond.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, and that's a
Frenchie
true
had,
American story when you think about it. You have two kind of disenfranchised immigrants that are coming together to help themselves through a hard time. That's the classic American story right there, and that's kind of a funny mirror side to what I was going to say about the hope being so important, because not only is it so dark, but one thing they've managed to do, and sadly it didn't take much adapting, is adapt what's going on with the superheroes to today's world. I mean, you've got some Homelander speeches and
Yes.
Stormfront speeches that are very similar, if not verbatim almost, from stuff we're hearing in the real world.
and especially Stormfront.
Mhm.
With a name like Stormfront, I should have saw the twist, but I honestly didn't
Yeah.
until it came.
Yeah.
But when that did happen, little moments, especially in the finale, I don't want to be too spoilery, but when Stormfront had said, "Everybody likes how I'm paraphrasing, everybody likes what I have to say, they just don't like the word Nazi," and that's pretty much, any pick up the news headline or go on Twitter any moment, and you can see people who echo that exact same sentiment.
Right.
Pretty much on a daily basis. So when she said that, I was just like, these writers are very hip, because it's my understanding the original story was, you know, early 2000s was what they were trying to satirize, specifically the Bush administration.
It
But
was
we
very
are,
big on the war on terror, kind of. And
mhm,
Stormfront specifically wasn't a
mhm,
woman, number one, but was a straight out and out obvious Nazi,
yeah,
like right
mhm,
to the SS on the shoulder and stuff like that.
mhm.
Yeah, it's the making that a twist, and what they've really added something to the original story, which is what was great about the show. I mean, the chemistry between all these characters is amazing. The casting, I mean, we haven't talked once about Carl Urban's Billy Butcher, and I mean, and that's an iconic character right there. That's an iconic character in the making.
And the thing is, Carl Urban, he always delivers. That's one thing I've noticed. Even I thought, one of, as much as I love Thor Ragnarok,
Mm-hmm.
his casting is kind of a missed opportunity, just because he can do so much with what he does,
Right.
and his character, while in Thor was important, he wasn't the headliner, if you will. And
Yeah,
as I was
he was a
watching,
henchman. He was Odd
yeah,
Job. If it was his Bond movie.
yeah, and as I was watching The Boys, I was just like, oh God, he's Wolverine. If we reboot this, why couldn't he have done that? Because he just carries
Yeah.
such a gruffness that makes him relatable and scary at the same time.
God damn, that now that's making me wish that Hugh Jackman had stepped down a while before, because I got to see. I don't know, Carl Urban. I mean, I know he's older than me, so he's at least in his early to mid 40s.
Hmm.
But I mean, I got to imagine that he's probably closer to 50. Yeah, 1972. So he's almost 50 years old. I hope I look like good when I'm almost 50.
Yeah.
So he's probably missed a train for that. But that, I mean, especially with the beard and this, he's perfect for
Yeah,
Wolverine.
he had the gruffness that just
Yeah.
would work for short Canadian with unbreakable skeleton and a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
That I really was, as I was watching The Boys, I was just like, oh, him as Billy Butcher is just very strong and very good, and I could see him just killing it as Wolverine. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's probably a missed opportunity at this point. But the fact remains that his character was 90% dick, 10% hero,
Yeah.
all the way through and through. But he absolutely made that work.
But he can drop the C word like nobody
Oh,
else. I'm not allowed to say that in my house, by the way. That's my wife's one of her like 3 or 4 no words that I'm not allowed to use.
I bet. I didn't even bother to see if that's a no word in my house.
It's just it is fun to say, as long as you don't say it too smooth. There's just something
Oh yeah.
like alleviating about saying But yeah, I mean, even everybody, even Mother's Milk, even who really is probably the most underused person in the cast. He's just such a good, strong, like, he's a big brother character to Huey when Butcher's not there. Now, admittedly, if you do go to the source material, he has the weirder backstory.
Really?
Yeah. His mother's, let's just say Mother's Milk is a literal nickname. And you can take that from where you will.
So a little bit of a Homelander vibe, if you will, or
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's more to it, but it is kind of like that. But the fact that he's in this thing for his wife and daughter, he's really got the biggest stakes of anybody left in here. And he's kind of glossed over, but still,
No, yeah, and well, the two things I absolutely loved about it, that what you were speaking of, he absolutely kind of has the most to lose, but still wants to do the right thing, which I find to be a heroic thing in and of itself, where you're just like, hey, I gotta toss my family to the side to make the world better.
Right.
That is ultimate sacrifice, hero stuff, as far as I'm concerned. But one thing, me personally, I absolutely loved is his T-shirt game is as perfect as humanly possible on that show.
Yeah.
Every single episode, I'm like, I'm buying that shirt. I gotta go find that, because
I'm trying to think of so he had Wu-Tang one week.
Yep.
He had Public Enemy one week.
Mm-hmm.
What else was there?
God, it was so many. I remember there was one, and I was just like, that's got to be the actor, Laz Alonso's creative input, because every single shirt was either hip hop or spoke to Black lives in
Mhm.
some manner, and he just was using the shirt to make a statement. And every
Right.
time I watched it, I was just like, oh, this is. I was like, I love that aspect about him.
Yeah, and
So
I
yeah, no.
guess from an analogy standpoint,
Hmm.
African Americans are represented a little bit more in this than I'm thinking. But from a
Hmm.
straightforward standpoint, for a story that's really based on what's going on today, that
Hmm.
side of it is kind of underrepresented, unless you're looking at the black community as the non-super community or something like that. But
Yeah. Well, I think the incorporation of Stormfront through things my way that made me just say, huh, interesting.
right,
And it was in addition to the twist when you realize who she really is,
hmm
was the first time. I can't think that the first episode was going to necessarily tackle race,
right,
especially within this construct. But the second season just said, yeah, we're going to lean into that a little bit. And they couldn't have predicted the future. And so I remember watching the Stormfront scene where she, basically bashed a black person's face in.
hmm
And it was very reminiscent of Emmett Till. And we can get to that when we talk about Lovecraft.
hmm
But just that little thing. And as I watched it, I was just like, that's not by accident. I was just like, we're going to go into that territory very quickly.
yeah,
And the way the show kind of did that was very clever and very sly. And Giancarlo Esposito, who once again um, steals the show in everything he does by playing, basically Gus Fring on steroids.
yeah. I mean, he's been stealing
Uh,
the show since back in the late '80s with Spike Lee, though.
yeah,
But I mean, ever since Breaking Bad, it's like everybody finally realized what this guy could do on the camera.
exactly. And so he had made one statement about his ambivalence to Stormfront while speaking with Butcher.
Hmm
And the way it was framed was something that, I personally, as a black man, can actually kind of understand and vibe with, because you can't kick and scream at racism. You kind of have to work within the confines that you're dealt with. And the way he, explained it, to Butcher, he said, I can't do that. He
hmm
said, that's, acting all crazy and blah, blah, blah. He said, I'm a black man. That's not the way I can do it. He said, that's something you can do as a white man,
hmm
to do that. And so as I was watching that, I was just like, the writing on this is very low key sly with what they're doing, and at the same time, very transformative in explaining our current climate without really just beating you over the head with it. So I
Well, that's
found
the
that to
trick.
also be interesting.
And I mean, for a lot of folks, like, and Travis and I hit on this a lot. Is like, there's things that he may see that I'm just blind to, not from any from any malicious intent, but just because nothing I've been exposed to or what have you. And writing like that really kind of, even if subconsciously, hammers it home, where
Mhm.
you realize in that comic booky world, it's put home that this world or this country, or however you want to put it, doesn't allow two people to do the same thing because of whatever reason. And they even go, so I give them extra credit. I've been watching Warrior. I don't know. Have you watched that on Showtime?
That is on my list, but I've heard it's very good though.
It's so good, but it really speaks to kind of an undertold story in the history of America's racism, is the racism against Chinese Americans on the West
Hmm.
Coast with the railroads. And the Stormfront initially goes after Kamiko's brother, who's immigrated in. Now, as it happens, he actually is immigrated as a terrorist, but that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with it. And it starts there. So there's a theme in a lot of shows today. It seems the more shows we talk about on here, it's a running theme of I want to think it's showrunners and writers finding a way to responsibly and entertainingly translate messages that need to be said. I'm sure for some
Hmm.
of them it's just jumping on the train of what's popular at the moment to talk about, but as long as the message gets out there.
Yeah, I think in regards to it's probably a little bit of both, especially the jumping on the train. I think there is actually more hiring of black and brown writers who
Mhm,
offer their input in a way that helps craft stories to be more entertaining, informative, and intelligent at the
mhm,
same time. So I think just a dynamic shift across the landscape, especially this year, we're going to see a whole bunch of different stories,
Mm.
in the future. But I think that aspect has also helped, increase the responsibility as well as the creativity, especially within writers' rooms, to kind of, effectively communicate different things that are,
Mm-hmm. And the
make it work
authenticity.
better.
I always felt like Hollywood. Speaking of, from any point of view other than a white guy's point of view, Hollywood always came off like Bradley Whitford in Get Out when he first comes out. Like that's what it always seemed like to me. And
Yes.
we get an authenticity now, and I guess that's a great segue to the next show that we're going to talk about. Now, I got to be honest with you. I've been a horror fan my whole life, and I've always known who H.P. Lovecraft was. I've always known who Cthulhu was, but I never read any of his books, and I never really had any exposure to him. So I was really excited for this, but then I was like, well, they're probably just using Lovecraft like as an allegory, or it's going to be something you don't see until season or episode 5. It's going to be dabbled in here and there. You start Lovecraft Country, and Cthulhu is in your face. Like the
When
second it starts, you're there.
Yeah, within the first 30 seconds, I remember I was watching it and then I was going like this. I was just like, this is my thing. This is my jam, because it's taking Lovecraftian images, but also kind of punching Lovecraft in the face for his views that many people didn't know, myself included.
I didn't know myself that, and he's apparently wasn't a great guy. Wasn't a loving fella to everybody.
Yeah, he wasn't full of love, but so it finds a way to toe the finest line of Hollywood owes monsters to Lovecraft,
Yeah.
and the way we view horror. But at the same time, he also eluded a horror that America continues to wrestle with, and its racial bigotry. And the way the show, within the first 30 seconds, had Jackie Robinson beating up Cthulhu, I was just like, oh, this is my jam right here.
Where are we, and how can I stay here? Right?
Yeah. And then the show has continued, and each episode, I remember, and I've written, on some of my articles when I review a show, I usually try to give something a 3-episode rule. A pilot is always an exposition dump,
right?
To introduce your characters. It may not necessarily flow the best. Some of the best shows did not have strong pilots,
right? Yeah. Trying to put too much in 60 minutes.
Episode 2 gives you that, all right, let's see where we're going to go. And episode 3 is where, all right, if this still sucks, it's time
your
to jump
cruise
ship.
control should be on at that point, so you should be off and running.
But Lovecraft operated in a very interesting way, because I was hooked in, and even after the first 3 minutes, I was just like, oh, I'm seeing this whole thing through and through.
Right.
But one thing I noticed was that the show doesn't necessarily have a strong linear narrative focus, which by episode 2 was, I remember seeing some detractors who said, I like this, I like what they're talking about, but we're used to a serialized storytelling where you miss one episode, that's on you. You're not going to follow this show. And Lovecraft operates very similar to how, I want to say, X-Files or even a show like Lost did, where we're going to tell this story, but we're also going to tell this other very small story centering on this one character, where if you miss the episode, it's not going to hurt you overall. Don't miss 2 episodes.
Right.
But they change genre. They change character focus. I think to myself, this is going to be a hard Emmys, because every episode that focuses on that specific character, they deliver an Emmy-worthy performance.
Right.
I honestly think pretty much the whole cast could do best acting and best supporting actor, because every single individually focused episode, they just really kill it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier, maybe for reasons other than performance, but performance can't be overlooked, about Journey Smollett, who most people came to know on a wider level from we'll just call it Birds of Prey. I'm not saying that whole title. And then she comes into Lovecraft Country, and she's not just a pretty face, that's for sure. She's got some of the strongest performances in there.
Absolutely.
Jonathan Majors, Courtney B. Vance, it's got, much like we were talking about with the boys. There's a lot of parallels actually to the boys, even though you might not think it, and the fact that it's an extremely strong cast. But this is another HBO show. The Watchmen, I think, caught a lot of people by surprise, not only
Yes.
by its moving from not following what's been previously written, but also its narrative on an alt future, I guess you could say, based kind of on what we're seeing now. And this is kind of an alt past based on the Jim Crow South and a young African American guy that's traveling across the country in the 50s, which, had to have been scary enough, if we're being honest. And you add Lovecraft into it, and I'm
Oh,
going home.
the pilot episode, the scariest thing was to escape from the police, to escape the sun. It wasn't
Yeah.
the monsters in the beginning or even the monsters at the end. It was, we got to outrun the cops by not speeding and getting out of this county by driving 30 miles an hour, or else we're going to die. Just the, and I also like the aspect that Lovecraft, and I've seen detractors from this, but I like shows that make you do homework.
Yeah. Well, it's not easy viewing. I mean, it's
No.
not. And for a number of reasons, it's not emotionally easy viewing. It's not intellectually easy viewing. And I bet a lot of people thought, "Oh, Lovecraft Country," not really knowing what it was all about. Thought they were just going to get some badass horror show or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And I've seen people, because the same way Watchmen made half the country Google Tulsa in 1921, Lovecraft made people look up sundown towns. It gave a better understanding of what a green book really is. For me myself, I have a lot of experience about many of the themes in Lovecraft, but I didn't understand a lot of the themes that centered in Jamie Chung's episode, whether it was what's going on in, what happened during the war in Korea. And I remember I was talking with one of my children, my oldest, because I don't let the little ones watch it. But they were curious about the Korean War because they didn't learn that in high school, which is boom.
Yeah. They always
And
skip
then,
World War II to Vietnam.
yeah. And so, and as we were watching, and as she asked me some questions, she said, "Well, what about this?" And I said, "You know what? I don't remember. I got to look this up."
Yeah.
So, in addition to the monster lore, because I didn't know anything about a six-tailed fox monster, that to me seemed like a succubus,
Yeah.
which actually was a part of Korean lore and Korean folk tales. So it allowed me to try to learn about that, as well as other aspects. And the show just makes you just kind of say, "Hey, this seems fantastical, but it also seems real. Let me learn a little bit more about that." And the latest episode, Kate gave a more holistic view of the Tulsa race riot, which served as a prologue in Watchmen, where you got to see some of it, but it was really as a jumping off point to tell a larger story
Right.
of that city and how reparations can impact generations forward from a racial trauma. The latest episode of Lovecraft really just kind of nails down, hey, this is, if you boots on the ground, this is how that night went for some people.
Yeah.
And the most impactful part of that was at the end where Montrose, a character who, depending on the episode, I was either loving or hating, gave a soliloquy where he was almost speaking to the audience at the end, listing the names of real people who were killed at the Tulsa massacre, which I just found to be informative, engaging, and heartbreaking at the same time. So it was by default,
Yeah.
And I always called that episode the For Your Consideration episode, because that was absolutely the most perfect episode of Lovecraft, and pretty much.
And I mean, you mentioned Michael K. Williams. I mean,
Yeah.
that's He plays Montrose, for anybody who doesn't know. But that guy has been constantly giving
Just killing it.
performances. But it's, you said you like to watch shows that make you do homework, and I always like that. I love
Mm-hmm.
a show that my wife hates, but I love a show that makes me pop up my phone and have to look up things on Wikipedia. But you know, this I think this most recent run of shows has been disturbing to most people for different reasons.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's disturbing to me on so many different levels. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we hear, and yeah, this happens every single week. Me and Travis do the same thing. We get into these socio political conversations and everything, but it's just, I mean, it's the way media is going right now, and to know that it wasn't slavery happened, slavery was abolished, and then everybody kind of didn't like each other, and then civil rights movement. Which
Yeah.
is what the schools would have, what school would have you believe. That's what my education basically was. It was
Mm-hmm.
slavery was abolished, and then everybody was kind of segregated and didn't like each other until the '60s when some people sat in a lunch counter. And that was
Yeah.
it. But no, I mean, like watching the Tulsa intro to Watchmen, watching things like that in Lovecraft, and saying, "Man, that this is a horrible fantasy," and then realize, "Oh wait, this
It's
isn't a
not.
fantasy.
Yeah.
This actually happened. I didn't know about it." And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then on the level of the show, the drama and layers that the shows add to it as well. It's a shocking, might not even be the right word, but it shakes you to your core watching this stuff
Oh,
and knowing, and they're able
absolutely.
to deliver this information. This is the real prize. This is why I love these shows. This is why I think everybody should watch them. Is they're able to deliver that prize in a way that's extremely effective and not watered down, but also I suppose using the word entertaining right now is off, but is also something you'd want to watch. It also delivers it in a story package that's entertaining at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's put it this way. It has to have some form of entertainment, or else we're watching a documentary.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that aspect, is it horrible? Absolutely. Is it traumatizing? Especially for people who have gone through things, within that world? Absolutely.
Yeah.
However, the core of what it does is give you information and keep you in tune to it. Because at the end of the day, every single one of the characters on this show, we don't want nothing to happen to them. So doesn't matter if they have magic spells covering them and everything else. You're still attached to these characters who are fictional,
Mm-hmm.
who are still living in a world that is incredibly real to all of us.
Right.
So that aspect, I absolutely like how the showrunner is able to really just navigate almost a perfect line of giving us
Yeah.
information and escapism at the same time.
Because that's something that's very hard to do, and you don't see very often is making it so that it feels like our world, but it's just a little bit out of it. Like
Mhm.
you when you go into your room after being away at work all day and something's moved, but you don't know what it is. That kind of feeling when you're watching one of these shows is
Mhm.
awesome. So, um, Lovecraft Country is available on HBO right now. If you don't have HBO, I don't know why you're watching the show. It's where everything is. HBO Max. The only problem with HBO Max, and I don't know if you subscribe to the Max yet, as I'll call it, but HBO Max, I've had it since day one. They can't get their deals down with Roku and with Amazon,
Thank
so
you.
it's
Thank
still
you so
only
much for saying that, because I have my cable provider gave me HBO Max for free.
right.
And so I'm like, okay, cool. Let me go on my Fire Stick and let me,
Good luck.
and I'm like, nope, I gotta go use my 6-year-old Chromecast, which barely streams to my TV if I want to watch it that
Oh, so
way.
at
And
least Chromecast there. I thought because we've got a Samsung TV downstairs, and that's the only thing that we can watch on. Because we have Roku, we have a mixed. We're bastardized all over the house.
oh yeah, same.
Technically,
Fire Stick in one room, Roku in
right.
the other.
Roku
So.
though, unless you're gonna side load stuff, unless you're gonna do some techie stuff to your streaming stick, Roku's the way to go. If you ask me, it's faster, it's
Hmm.
cleaner, it's everything's there. But yeah, Samsung's the only way I've been able to watch that. But I just to vent for that for a second. But if you can't, if you don't have HBO Max, what you can do, and I think this is really cool, and kind of a sign of what needs to be done. I'm sure they're not making all their money back this way, but AMC and Cinemark theaters are renting out theaters in all 50 states plus DC right here in our area for
Yes.
$99, 20 people.
Yes, and that's such a steal, if you will. I personally had just talked with my extended family about that, because we starting to make our, oh, what are we going to do for Corona for Christmas ideas? Because just a side note for my extended family, every Christmas morning we go to the Silver Spring movie theater and enjoy a movie.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting there like, this will be breaking a 30-year tradition because of this virus. And then AMC sends this email like, oh, guess what you can do for $99? I was just like, oh, we're
Silver Spring's Regal though.
well, not Silver Spring. Hey, I'll go to, go elsewhere.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think where else. But AMC is given that option, which I think is, they need to do something because unfortunately they're hemorrhaging money at this point.
I mean, anything you can do.
Yeah.
And let me just run down the full deal that they got going on. So, for the $99, it's the lowest tier. Obviously, you weren't gonna get whatever you wanted for $99, but it doesn't get a whole. But it's not like $500 for a new movie. $99. There's classics you can watch. Hocus Pocus, How to Train Your Dragon, Nightmare Before Christmas, Jumanji: The Next Level. Okay, classics is being used a little loosely here.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park and Monsters.
Still fun.
Inc. Yeah, it's still fun. All fun movies, and then current movies: Tenet, War with Grandpa, and other newer movies are available $149 plus tax for the theater, up to 20 people.
Okay.
Food, you can get it catered for an additional $250. So if we're looking at it, $350. I'm not good at math, but let's say you have your 20 people. Hold on, let me get this out here. Let's just see what kind of a deal we're getting. 350 divided by 20. So for $17.50 a person, which is less than you would pay for each person to go to a movie and get popcorn, you have your theater all to yourself, and you can have that family tradition. We used to do that. Me and my brother and my sister used to go every holiday, Thanksgiving and Christmas, to a movie after dinner. But it's just, when we started having kids, it was like, there's too many people, we're not really. So this is something I'm really going to think about doing, because that would just be really cool, especially with some of the better Christmas movies coming out, like Fat Man, for instance.
Which is going to be interesting.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question about that. So, we mentioned, H.P. Lovecraft has a horrible past that people didn't really know about. He was a vehemently racist person. And then you have Mel Gibson, who seems to be coming back into his way. Now, what he did was horrible. He was drunk. He went out and he said some bad things. I think there's more to it that maybe I just don't know about. But is there a place in the world where we can separate the person from the art and appreciate somebody like Mel Gibson's performances?
I think we can. There's two things. Hacksaw Ridge kind of showed that we can, because everybody's like, oh yeah, Mel Gibson's a good director, and
there was a reason we liked him.
Yeah, and it was in consideration for awards and everything else. Unfortunately, he also kind of, did what he did, and I don't necessarily recall him being too apologetic for it.
I think that's the main thing.
He gave his publicist approved response and said, "Okay, I did it. Can I come back to Hollywood, please?"
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, that lack of remorse or lack of genuine empathy and I screwed up, I'm sorry, has been missing, which has caused a lot of people still to want him to be in timeout, if you will.
Yeah.
Me personally, I listened to him and I was just like, oh wow, I wonder what Danny Glover thinks about this. That was my first thought.
Right.
But by default, I'm not a proponent
Not to interrupt you, but that's a
super
good
canceling.
point. They were one of the first, like really interracial, like buddy cop groups that was on TV. Like that was one of the first times you saw these two folks that weren't both black or weren't both white or weren't both Asian, and they were best friends and they were family and going over each other's houses. It's so weird. Yeah.
And I would say probably, I mean, he's been in timeout for a while. I noticed when Fat Man, the trailers were released, the I Hate Mel crowd kicked back up. If you will.
What is he keeps poking his head up? Like he had what was the one where he had a gopher puppet? He keeps poking his head up in these good performances every few years. He's been working pretty steadily, but he's working in the Bruce Willis circus now. With him and Nicolas Cage. Like putting out 500 movies a year, and who knows what quality they are. But he pokes his head out every now and then, and just to see test the waters, and then he goes back away. But Fat Man, as soon are you a fan of the movie Scrooged?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
All I
And this
thought
to
of
me, yeah.
was the opening scene in Scrooge where you have Lee Majors, defending Santa's North Pole headquarters from a bunch of commies, probably since it was the '80s, and it's very satirical and all that. And then Fat Man, if anybody hasn't seen the trailer for it, essentially this kid gets coal for Christmas from Santa, who's played by Mel Gibson. And when the kid gets older, I think there's a time lapse there. The kid gets older and he hires a hitman played by one of my favorites, Walton Goggins, to kill Santa Claus.
That's my selling point, because as I'm looking,
Yeah.
I'm like, Walton Goggins, he was introduced to me as Shane from The Shield, who was kind of an incredibly despicable character, but I absolutely loved him. So every time I watch Walton Goggins, he plays serious very well. He does comedy very well. So for him to be in this weird, I got to go kill Santa Claus, who's Mel Gibson movie, it kind of makes me sit there and be like, yeah, I kind of want to see what this is about.
I have to see where it goes. Whether it's a train wreck or not, I have to see where it goes.
Because it seems so strange to mesh all that together. So.
Yeah, what was that conversation like? I mean, that doesn't sound like a studio pitch. That sounds like you're high with
that
your buddies.
Seems like that seems like people at a bar like, I want to play Santa, and you be a hitman who has to come kill me.
Right.
And somehow that ended up on an executive's desk.
Well, wait, why would a hitman do it? Because the kid got cold. You're right. All right, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Tatiana Maslany, that we talked a couple weeks ago about her casting as She-Hulk. Since that time, we've gotten to know that we've got Miss Marvel cast as well. But it seems that that Maslany may not be. Her actual quote was, "I don't know how these things." It's totally not. It's like a press release that got out of hand. I've been connected to these things in the past, and press has gotten into it, but it's not actually a thing, unfortunately. I don't know how these things get. I don't know. So
yeah, that was a little heartbreaking, because as soon as I heard she was cast, I was just like, She-Hulk's gonna be awesome.
Because I didn't want Allison. I love Allison Brie. Don't get me wrong, but did not write for that role. I don't think. I don't see it working. I mean, maybe like an Aubrey Plaza type if you want to go full on comedy.
Actually, that's good casting right there as well. But when Tatiana Maslany was cast, I remember I sat there and I was just like, good, because she stole the show in Orphan Black. And she has since done other things, but she I feel that she's somebody who should get something tentpole as well, to where she can just really flex her chops and have some fun. And the idea of being the Hulk's cousin getting a blood transfusion to become a superhero lawyer who breaks the fourth wall just is perfect. That would work very well on the small screen, and eventually be in a can you imagine her and Deadpool taking turns talking to the audience?
And her being the more level-headed of the two.
Of course.
my whole problem is do they change that origin story? Because I always kind of had an issue with the Hulk giving his cousin a blood transfusion with his Hulk blood in there. He had to know that something might happen. Like I mean, not that it's comparable to HIV, but it's like it's an incurable thing you have in your blood, right? So why would you, the same way you wouldn't give a transfusion to somebody else then? But I'm sure they'll figure it out.
I think they probably will stick with the original, but. But you make an incredibly good point with that. So
just didn't make much sense to me. She can be seen on Perry Mason right now. I don't know if you've been watching that, but Perry Mason.
I have not, but I heard it's incredible.
It's very, very good. One of the most fucked up, if you take my language, openings that I've ever seen. There's something about kids, and specifically dead kids on film, that has not been. I mean, you can go to anything. Horror movies won't even go there 99% of the time. Perry Mason jumps out in Front Street with its its primary motivator being a very disturbing image. One of speaking of superheroes, not Perry Mason obviously, but She-Hulk. One of the big question marks since all this stuff started blowing up, and really right at the beginning of the comic book blow up, there was a really popular cartoon, probably the most popular comic book cartoon at the time, was Static Shock. Um,
Yes.
Now, why he hasn't been brought into it? He's basically a kid who has the electricity powers. Basically, he's going to do
Mm-hmm.
Static Shock, and it was a really well written cartoon. It's been years since I've seen it, so I don't remember a ton about it. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's maybe thoughts about it like that. It just came. I think if that cartoon had started a little bit later, we would have already seen this definitely. But
Oh
it's
yeah.
been missing from and as we talk more about diversity in film and in the comic book world, it seems like an even bigger question mark as to why one of the most popular African American heroes in comics hasn't had their own show. And Michael B. Jordan's changing that. Now
Yes.
I'm looking at an article and they put Michael B. Jordan. The image, it's a cross picture, right? And the image they used of Michael B. Jordan was Killmonger. And then they have
Mm-hmm.
picture of Static Shock, and I'm looking. I'm like, wait a second, he's just gonna play Static Shock, right? He's not just producing this thing.
I think he's a little too old for it,
Yeah.
but Michael B. Jordan, even when he produces things, has to make his presence known,
Mm-hmm.
either as a side character. I remember Raising Dion. He played Dion's dead father seen through flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
As I was hearing this news, I was just like, okay, there should be a Static Shock movie or TV show. He's, like you said, one of the most popular DC teen superheroes,
Yeah.
and that's not even,
This is prior
black,
to
white,
Titans
anything.
getting really big, right?
He's just incredibly fun.
Yeah.
Um, Michael B. Jordan involved makes me interested because he genuinely tries to attach himself to projects that are strong, diverse, and overall tell engaging and interesting stories.
Right.
Seeing and I'm more of a Marvel shill, if you will, but I also like to see the distinguished competition get a win here and there. They've been doing very well on the small screen
Yep.
with all the CW shows,
Mm-hmm.
but I really want to see them continue that little corner they have with Black Lightning, because I think that's a very slept on show as well.
Mm-hmm.
And try to flex that for Static Shock, who was one of the OGs from the Milestone era
Yeah.
of comics.
I mean, that
That
show, to put it in perspective, that show
mhm.
debuted in September 2000 on WB Kids. So
Yeah.
this is before Teen Titans gets big.
Hmm.
This is even before, if my dates are right, like Justice League Unlimited and all those things got really big. So this is one of the first things. This comes right around the same time as X-Men hit big.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I might be digging a little bit, but it definitely contributed to the rise of comic book media.
Oh
In the
no,
early 2000s.
there are a generation of kids that know Static Shock and and John Stewart's their Green Lantern, and Static Shock is Static Shock, and those were their favorite Saturday morning people because they were
Right.
just incredibly awesome. So to have him, either do a movie or a TV show, would just be incredibly awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I really want to see who they would cast, because my brain already flares to, and I'm going to butcher his name. It's Caleb something, the young fellow from Stranger Things.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
I think he could probably nail Static Shock, if because he's at the right age
Yeah.
where that can work.
Yeah,
So
because he's got to be like 16 now, I'd imagine. So it's almost perfect.
yeah.
Assuming that we ever get out of COVID and we can
Yeah.
get him in front of a camera.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's coming up. We don't even have actually, we're getting close to our hour here, but not even to harp on a long time. But one of the movies that I really liked that I was surprised didn't get more of a following or more talk out from it was The Man from Uncle. Still makes me think that Henry Cavill should be the next Bond because of him. Gave me Army Hammer in a way that I liked him. It was a fun movie, just a perfect little action movie, and then we never heard anything else about it. And Army Hammer was Henry Cavill has said, Cavill whatever, has said in the past that he wouldn't mind doing another one. Now Army Hammer's saying he's totally down for it too. So that's kind of it's a really neat property that hasn't been overdone in a genre
No, not
that
at all.
has been overdone, and can really be touched upon there. So. Yeah,
No,
so
I agree totally. You know, an incredibly slept on movie that has to this point gained, you know, somewhat of a cult status.
Hmm.
That's almost begging. And speaking of, you know, and I don't want to sound rude when I say this, but speaking of people who need a win, is Army Hammer. He's a very interesting actor that for some reason has his it factor hasn't exploded to the mainstream, if you
Come
will.
right up there and then just keeps
Yeah,
going down. It's like right before it boils over, it just.
yeah, and he, you know, that's why I could see him wanting to do that because that's a playground that he worked exceptionally well in,
Yeah.
and can just if he can get that and then just get over that little plateau that's holding him back, probably open himself up for a whole lot more. So
Yeah, I mean, he is really. We were talking just a few weeks about this movie, and now I can't remember the name of it again. But it was Brie Larson and Army Hammer. I'm gonna try and pull it up and see if I can find it. But it was basically a Free Fire, I think is what it was called. Yeah, Free Fire. It was. I caught it on Netflix just one random Saturday.
I know what you're talking about. They're like stuck in a warehouse and everybody just pretty much kills each other for, you know.
Yeah,
Yes.
Charlton Copley's in it, and it's a perfect show of the type of character that he is really really good at doing this cool but kind of morally ambiguous. You know, could be good, could be bad, and he can fall in that line perfectly. I mean, I just thank God the guy's as good looking as he is because his family is the ones that you know are the of Arm and Hammer. You know, he literally is from that dynasty there. And his parents straight up looked at each other and said, "Let's name him Army." So Army Hammer, get it? I'm like, come on, man. I thought that was a joke. But yeah, so that's hopefully coming up this weekend. You also got Liam Neeson is still speaking of people that got forgiven. Liam Neeson is still making movies. And Honest Thief is his movie out this weekend. You've also got Love and Monsters, Dylan O'Brien, who I still feel bad for because he was. There's a series of books by Vince Flynn. Well, he's since passed away. Vince Flynn has, but and somebody else has taken over. But they're the Mitch Rapp books. It's basically Jack Reacher or James Bond or any of those people. And I love them. They're just amazing books, and they adapted one of them into a movie called American Assassin. It was supposed to be the start of a franchise. Dylan O'Brien starred in it, and it just crashed and burned. The movie was good, just didn't catch on. So he's been relegated to back to his Maze Runner days. He's done Love and Monsters, and this sounds like I'm bashing it, but Love and Monsters, which actually looked pretty damn fun.
It looks like, and if correct me, Michael Rooker's in that playing the Obi-Wan role, if you will. Like, I think that would, you know, in a non-COVID world where not everything was on VOD, that would be a sleeper hit, you know, out of nowhere. It looks like it has the right amount of fun to it. A road trip to find your girl while, you know, kaiju are killing everybody.
Right.
You know, incredibly fun.
And it looks like that's what most people think because right now on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 90% critic review and 94% audience review. So that's pretty high. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. I do have marked on, like I said, we'll get you guys reviews for The Kid Detective, which I am really looking forward to. That's also getting great reviews.
I did my review for Liam Neeson's Honest Thief, which on Punch Drunk. And I'm not the biggest fan of post-taken Liam Neeson. He just kind of, you know, rinse, wash, repeat. But that movie actually
now I'm on a bus, now I'm on a subway, now I'm on a train.
Yeah. But that Honest Thief actually has some legs. I actually had some fun watching that, and I think that movie is Jai Courtney's best role outside of him just playing, you know, bonkers Captain Boomerang, where he plays a corrupt FBI agent basically trying to kill Liam Neeson, which is not always a good idea. But for once, he doesn't kind of feel forced. He's very natural in that.
Always been my problem with him.
Yeah.
And he looks like Shrek, but other than that.
I mean, I said in my review, you know, there are times where I feel that Hollywood just keeps trying to force Jai Courtney on us. This one feels natural. Like he should play more bad guys. Like he really worked in that movie for me. And
it's funny. Some people they never get to success because of something as simple as that. They always play on the wrong side of the plate. Van Damme, for instance, you know, after 1993, Jean-Claude Van Damme couldn't be found anywhere in a theater. He was on a video
Yes.
store shelf. But then we see him in Expendables 2, and he plays this amazing villain.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately named Jean Villain, because they're really creative over there. But he just
Mm-hmm.
was sucking up the screen as a villain, and this is why people shouldn't try to get typecast unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, where you're such a hero character that you cannot see yourself
As the
being
bad
anything
guy.
else. You need to try both sides of that track.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yeah. So I would recommend honestly, to see Honest Thief. If you're a fan of Taken and that little area of
Mm.
Easton's old man action movies and not his newer stuff, that actually might be a fun time to just kind of watch him try to turn back to his old self and put some energy into it. So,
I mean, Taken came out in 2008. Am I wrong?
yep.
He was old then. That
Yes,
was
he
12 years
was.
ago. I gotta pull this up. How old is Liam Neeson now?
Yeah, no,
Um,
he's got to be at least 75, maybe. I don't know.
no, he's 68.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, he's
Good for
68. So
him.
he just looked older in his 50s, I guess was all it was. But I mean, 68 is still. My mom's 70. She's not doing action movies anytime soon. Um, that sounds like Honest Thief is a way to go if you like that Liam Neeson action. And then, like I mentioned, The Kid Detective, which stars one of my favorite personalities and one of the people that has not had the luck of Hollywood strike to him, Adam Brody. I know
Hmm.
he turns some people the wrong way, but I see kind of a kindred spirit in him. I'm not for everybody, especially when I'm not on air and not video. I'm very sarcastic, overly so. I can't control it. I can't help it. It's well intentioned, and I think that's how Adam Brody comes off. So his movie, The Kid Detective, will have a review up for you by this time tomorrow. So. But Khalil, I appreciate you taking the time out and jumping on here with us, man. I hope we do it
Amen.
again
It's
soon.
always a blast. I can't wait to do the next one.
Absolutely, man. So until next week, we're the Punch Drunk Critics. Check us out every day on punchdrunkcritics.com. On Twitter, we are at PDC Movies, at Punchy Critic, at Punch Drunk John, on Twitch. Subscribe to Travis's Twitch at cinematic_enforcer. Khalil, what's your social media? You got anything you want to drop?
I'm on Twitter at Alilreview, ALILREVIEW, and where I post most of my thoughts on movies as well as my reviews that are on Punch Drunk Critics.
Awesome. And if you guys have any info for us, any tips, any questions, if you want to try your hand at writing reviews or anything like that, hit us at info@punchdrunkcritics.com. Until next week, we'll talk to you guys later. See ya.
All right, have a good one.